I just thought about the idea that Shane sometimes gets to a point that he can't get past, and then he'll say something like, well, my explanation of existence is better than yours. He basically thinks that, I say I don't know, and saying what he says is better. And I was just thinking that, is it the case that him saying that, he's also implying that his, like what he's saying is legitimized only because I can't come up with something better. So that doesn't mean his is the answer. That just means, from what he's saying, is he thinks I don't know is not a better choice. Yeah, I guess you can explain, show that easily. If somebody asks you a question like, can I jump into this pool from the roof and be okay? If you say, yeah, I was standing over there in the kitchen looking through the window, and out of the reflection of the mirror I could see the pool, and I think I remember how high the roof is, so it should be good. Or should they say, I don't know, let me go find out? So then you go find out, okay? And then with Shane, he said, yeah, I go and find out, and it's the best explanation, but he'll have to say that he can find, which acknowledges and implies that he doesn't know everything, which means there's at least a chance that what he found is not correct. And from what he's saying, if there's even a chance, it's way tipped in the side of not likely. It just looks too similar to just so many other things that we know we do. It's connected to humanity intrinsically. And, it's like not just that story, but all the stories. So there's no way. And in fact, a reasonable person would have to be suspicious. They would have to go, well, man, it's like when you might think something could be true or not, but you don't necessarily want it to be, or you want it to be, so you're a little nervous about it, like, can I do this, or should I do this, or is this correct, and you're like, I don't know, I hope so, or I hope I get it right. That happens all the time. So it's like, there is no way that I could believe this to be the description of how existence came to be. I mean, if we're talking about the existence that I'm aware of, and you're talking about this collection of stories that I'm aware of, then I'm sorry. Existence is far too complex and big than, to say something like that. It just is impossible to believe that. I can see how people end up doing it. The word indoctrination is a word for a reason, a very known reason. So it's like, the issue is death. People in general don't want to discuss death, and sort of, I guess religion is a way of talking about death without actually talking about it, It's like Jesus paid the ultimate price, death, suffering for us. So we don't have to, it's like everything is about avoiding. And even the biggest moment is the God becoming human, getting tortured and killed to die, to know what that feels like, and to save us from that specifically, So it is all about death, It all comes back to that. The fear, the not knowing, the not understanding. And, I get that it's confusing and can be scary, and just like intimidating, and doesn't make any sense. It's like, not here? What does that mean? It doesn't make sense. But we can just look. People are here, they're alive, and then one day they're dead, and you can't communicate with them anymore. You don't see them anymore. That single wave that you saw, rolling into the shore, where did it go? It was there. It's the same thing. So it seems to me that accepting that could be called a religion. It's like the acceptance of you not being here, or at least even if you do continue, just the acceptance of this is what it seems like. Should I deny that my whole life? Like, it seems like I have one life. Should I deny my death the entire time? And it's, Jesus will liberate you. Well, the truth will set you free. It might not feel good as it's washing over you, but then it liberates you. Free to die, free to live. But existence isn't all about living and dying. There's a lot of surviving for a human, for all animals, for everything. Even the sun will stop surviving. Right now, it's in constant survival. It's in full operational, let's move mode. And then at some point, it'll run out of gas, and that's it. Kabooey. So, it's a curious thing. It's funny, and Shane will, I'm not afraid of death. The not to say anything bad about him. This happens in so many different ways for everybody. It's just a complexity in your head that is working in a certain way, that your mind is sort of telling you this, and that mind is you, so you can't sort of avoid it. If you think that you can't do something, then you're not going to do it. You can't do it and not think you are going to, not do it. You have to do it, obviously. Good grief, that's so stupid. Like Seinfeld said the other day, it is what it is. Everybody's saying it is what it is. Yeah. It is true though. Alan Watts spent his life trying to share the idea of letting go and being free. Even for a moment. It's not like you have to, like I'm out running right now. I don't act like I'm running all the time. You're not like, jumping off a rooftop into a pool every moment. There's a lot of routine and mundane. But I think in these moments, what it is, liberation and whatnot, is a sort of manifests as a calmness, quite calm and peaceful, and it's like riding, on a wave, and you're sort of surfing it, and you're just chilling, going, you're in traffic on the way to the gym, and it's a little tight, and you wish you were already there. And that's also part of religion, where they, it's comfort, it's community, it's comfort, it's other people saying they also have trouble dealing with things, and this idea of Jesus saving them, it's comforting, and you're part of a town that all feels that way, and hey Shane, hey, how's it going? Oh, I'll see you tomorrow at church. What are you bringing? Are you bringing chicken or chicken? That was the good old days, like in the 80s and early 90s, when people went to church and actually did do that. Now it's ridiculous. The churches are just ridiculous. But yeah, community is good. Whatever way you get it. Hindu, Islamic, Jewish, Christian, agnostic, all coming together and hanging out together. Like, why can't all those people hang out together? If I was gonna actually say a religion, it'd be the religion of being present and thinking and being curious. I don't really give a shit if you're religious. I sort of care what you say and do, and the way you think and act, and how's your mind working? That's what's interesting to me. Like, when you go to church, why would I care about that? I'd rather ask you, when's the last time you thought about death or not being here? Can you imagine being at a church in Alabama, getting into a conversation with somebody and saying something like that? I think they'd be a little caught off guard. Most people would, to be fair, but it's much better, like, understanding philosophically and what makes people tick every day. I have faith in Jesus. This mean, what does that mean? It's a symbol of what? Saving, being saved, grace, love. Like, is it love? What the love is that he sacrificed himself. And I don't like to harp on it, but again, the dude's God. He was human for what? A very short time, and now has been God for 1970 years. So, and more than that, because he was eternal before he was Jesus. So if that's where the love is, that sacrifice, then I'm sorry, like, how does that work? I mean, I see how it works in symbolism. It's a symbol of love. It's like, I don't even know how it's a symbol. Yeah, I mean, it's sacrificing. So sort of the cultural thing is, what would Jesus do? And in your life, sacrifice, Jesus is the symbol for sacrificing. But if you mean it like literally, like then I'm sorry, it doesn't work, because the Jesus is God. Oh, he was human then. Well, again, always existing as God and a few days as suffering human. I'm sorry. This doesn't work for the type of saving. I mean, you're literally saying, this is saving all mankind. This is humanity being saved here. I mean, I'm sorry. It'd have to be like Jesus was always God and Jesus became a human and died as a human and died and literally sacrificed itself as a God to never exist again, just to show the people true sacrifice. Now that, I mean, you can't really, how you argue with that? I don't know very many people that would give up being a God to sacrifice themselves for others. I mean, this is not a very common thing. I mean, we won't sacrifice ourselves virtually at all. We'll blame it all on our family as well. Like, I'm sorry, I've got a family. I would, but I got a family. I can't, I have a family. It's like, okay, all right, well, what about the rest of humanity? So, now you're sacrificing yourself as a God. Now, the God of the Bible, as it is, I don't exactly get that God. It's like, I mean, as far as the Christians seem to know, that that God is a male being God, somehow with a male son, and there's something else called the Holy Spirit, and they're supposed to be outside of time and space. That seems a little suspicious, and I don't know if I would want to live that way. If you were God, what would you do? Oh shit, if I had my human brain, it's like, well, for me, I would like to be with Elsa, so I guess I would bring Elsa up. I guess eventually, as the God, I would probably, wouldn't you just make everyone God? And I guess that's kind of what Hinduism is. I was hearing Alan Watts the other day, and he was like, the Hindus they'll hear someone say, I just found out that, I'm one with God, and they'll say, oh, you're just finding that out now? Like we're all that way. And I mean, obviously that's true. I agree. I mean, this whole talk about, God, you're not going to become a God in the sense of an all-powerful being. It doesn't seem like. But I really like that idea of that I was just saying about giving up the all-powerful God experience indefinitely. Even if it was Jesus doing it and there was still the God, and the God could be like, look, I tried to stop him. I told him that we could trick these people into thinking that 3 days is enough. But he insisted. He said, no, this is the only true way to do it. And then when you ultimately, God, Father, come back, you can be proud of me. But I guess instead, I don't know what they're doing. I guess they're being gods somewhere together. I guess as a God, yeah, I mean, whatever. Hey, we're going with what's in the stories, There's no mention of like, oh yeah, they're in this alternate realm and they have a family and they live in a house. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, funny. It's also how funny how running and talking like this, I end up going faster, which is not what I wanted to do today. All right, I'm out of here. I was just thinking about another little tidbit for Shane, how I could say that, I basically follow all the commandments. I follow all the commandments, the 10 commandments. I've never killed anybody. I've never had an abortion even, if you want to call that murder. But where I draw the line is worshiping an idol. Seems to me like that worship no other gods but me is a test. No idols, no worship. But then I'd ask, why? Why does it say no other gods? No idols? Why is that? Yeah, why is that? All but me. Because I promise I'm the one that's going to save you. And maybe therein lies the idol worship issue, is that the idol, I think one of the main characteristics is that it's trying to get you to give yourself to it. And it's usually, what it is under false pretenses. So, as far as Christians go, I'm basically as good as any other Christian. Even lying or cheating or anything, I don't do that. I've learned not to do that. And I would imagine Christians that don't do it also have learned not to do it. So, Shane's saying you don't need to do anything. Well, I guess there's nothing I need to do. And idol worship is not something I'm willing to do. I'm under the impression that if there is something, some type of being or beings that created this existence, then just like us, if we're made in its image, we don't take lightly to that. We don't take lightly to idol worship. We don't take lightly for giving yourself up under false pretenses. We steer people clear of that. And as that God, as those beings, if we're like that, why wouldn't they be like that? Again, this is convoluting Christian theology with some sort of fantasy reality. It's like, that's in the Christian theology or whatever doctrine that says we're in the image of God. But there's no proof of that. They just say that. Now, when we look at a human, You know, if we go at different levels deep, it sort of feels like we are part of existence, and it seems like we are part of existence, and it looks like we are part of existence, but it is easy to but it is easy for like our mind to trick us, because we're sort of a part of existence. You wouldn't want the hammer to be acting like the wheel. So they're both part of existence, but they have different motions, different sort of characteristics, as they emerge out of the fabric of existence. I mean, think about how you can describe existence in these ways. That if you really think about it, sit with it, it sort of feels like truth. It's like, yeah, we're like, here I am running on the earth, and then you can kind of zoom out, and you look down, and all of a sudden, very quickly, you can't even see me. Or go on a microscope and go into my skin, very quickly I just disappear. It becomes a different world very, very quickly. My perspective is limited, to say the least. Now, luckily I can move, so I can have different vantage points. That's pretty cool. So you can learn and discover new information. But if we couldn't, then we wouldn't. Maybe be like a tree, same place your entire existence, unless somebody cuts you up and takes you somewhere, turns you into something else. What a beautiful day. Anyway, curiosity lived the cat. I'm on the about to hit the most difficult part of the run at the very end. It's pretty short, but it's hard. Get your heart rate really up. But I was just thinking about the idea, again, about abortion. And so I'm always for the woman's rights. The one that we know about, that we have relation with, have a history. Many people have a history. People might have depend on them. They might have kids already. They might have an entire life ahead of them. Anyway, it's complex. So I'm always for it being their choice. But I was just thinking about how, if you were like Shane, and the woman was like, no, I want to have an abortion. I don't want to be pregnant. And I actually don't want to be pregnant with you. Now, or maybe let's make it more simple. She just doesn't want to be pregnant, but she wants to be with Shane. What does Shane do? Now he could say, I wouldn't be with a woman that said that. Well, so a woman can't change her mind after some years? So let's say she changes her mind. What do? You force her to have the baby? Woo! you force her and then take the baby away and then get rid of the woman? Do you let the woman choose and then she has an abortion and then you protest for her, putting her in jail for what she did? How do you handle that? How would you handle that? Now, this is definitely a situation that occurs. And Shane can say, well, that's not common. It's like, I'm sure it's quite, something that happens, maybe not exactly, but something similar. But either way, I'm just curious, there's a discrepancy there. It definitely, someone has had that choice. What do? Pray to God, see what he says. Well, God told me to have an abortion. Okay. God wouldn't say that. Abortion is murder. Well, according to who? Doesn't seem like it's murder across the world. Sounds like only you and some fanatical people are calling it murder. How can we trust you? It's just, come on. So I think that's a pretty good one. It's like a dilemma. And maybe he would just say, yeah, she would have to go to jail, or, or I would force her to have the baby. I'd tie her up in the basement. I don't know, man. We would talk about it. I would try to convince her. I would pray about it. I would pray with her. We could pray together. She would see the light. I know. She would see how evil it is, and she wouldn't be that evil. I wouldn't be with someone that would be like that. It's just... Anyway. I was just thinking about getting a list together of the top sort of, reasons I would say that it doesn't make any sense at all. Babies, if they're murdered, go to heaven for all eternity. Only a male father God with a son. Anyway, whatever. That's a funny one, where you could say somebody who makes something and you buy it from them and it's flawed or broken, or maybe it works for a week and then it just starts attacking you. What would you do? Would you blame the product, or would you blame the maker of the product? I think in reality, we all blame the maker of the product. But in the Christian mindset, they blame the person. I guess I could say, well, the creator gave the product free will and it can choose what it does. Let's see. So if it chooses what it does, there's a disclaimer that says, you can't blame the God. It created it perfect, but it gave it free will, and it just so happens that it's inclined to be broken and attack the person, the attack. So at that level, do you blame the creator? It's like, okay, I hear that you gave it free will, but it seems like you also tuned it in a way that could have been a lot better, you know, like why does it get cancer, you know, or why, there's all these questions of why is it flawed, basically, and the creator maybe could say, well, if you create it, I said I created it perfectly or in my image, but to have free will, you have to be flawed. I'm trying to get to where it makes sense, like where does it make sense? In the reality that we all share, it's more like survival of the fittest. What works continues. What fits continues. What works, what lives, what continues to survive continues. And so what you end up doing is getting a situation that supposedly like keeps getting sort of, I wouldn't say better, but multiplying in a way, growing, if you're not growing, you're dying, sort of thing. So it's sort of, that's how nature is, that's how we are, that's how people are, that's how societies are, cultures are, and yes, they change and they grow, and even societies sort of, they die out. They there hasn't been a society that has continued forever. The Indian people have been around for quite a long time, but not as long as humans. They're pretty close though. They've been around as long as we can sort of remember, sort of clearly. They're kind of one of the oldest cultures, I guess. And they are very old, so they keep surviving. The Christians, have only been around for 2,000 years, less than 2,000 years. The Christian culture. So will it keep going? It's still going. But things are changing, pretty rapidly, and people are realizing more isn't always better. How about that? Sometimes you want quality over quantity. So, you don't need to have 6 children anymore. And, and everybody, if you have sex, you have a baby. We don't need it. We don't want that. So, yeah, pretty interesting little thought there.